welcome to Wetpixel Live. My name is Adam Hanlon. I'd like to introduce our regular contributor, Alex Mustard. Hi, Alex.
Hey, Adam. Good to see you.
Nice to see you too. We thought today what we'd cover is one of the most asked questions on the Wetpixel forums, and it's to do with macro photography, and it's how to create a black background when we're shooting in macro. So it's a really kind of essential technique for all would-be macro photographers. So, Alex, go on then. How do you do it?
I think actually this sort of question actually sort of came about, particularly became a really big question when compact cameras first appeared.
Yeah.
Because actually in the old film days, the classic settings for macro with a 35mm, say, Nikonos with a close-up kit, the classic settings and the combination of using slow slide film meant that actually we always got black backgrounds, and people were far more interested in not having black backgrounds.
Yeah.
But when compact cameras came along, it became much more of a challenge, partly because they were operating at higher ISOs,
yeah,
partly because they were operating with relatively weak inbuilt flashes, and partly because they were operating with relatively more open aperture settings. And all those things meant that the ambient light was flooding into the macro shots, and compact camera shooters in particular were struggling to get those black backgrounds.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think when it became a big issue, about 15 years ago or so. And so ever since then, it's probably been one of the most asked questions in underwater photography.
Certainly has, yeah.
The key to getting a black background in a macro shot is to light your subject with flash and stop the ambient light from being part of your picture.
Yep.
And that's the key to the technique, really. So, and I think the reason why it's so desirable in underwater pictures is few things make a subject, the colors of a subject, the shape of a subject,
yep,
stand out and be so impactful as having that clear subject on a clean, dark background.
Yeah.
It just makes the colors ring out. It makes the shape ring out. It makes the subject have a huge impact.
Yep.
And however many times you've seen it, it continues to work. I'm trying to find a picture of it. I mean, this is from my book on underwater photography, and the first picture in the macro chapter is a black background, a colorful subject on a black background, and that is why we do it.
Yeah.
We don't want all our macro pictures to look this way,
yep,
but as a route one first option, it's definitely the way to go.
Yep.
So the key to getting it begins with getting exactly the right settings. So we want our flash on the right power to light the subject up, but we need to get our camera settings tuned right, and that means with the three main controls of shutter speed, aperture, and ISO, we need to use specific numbers with specific values. We want fast shutter speeds to stop the ambient light coming in the picture. A quick exposure doesn't give time for that ambient light to come in, but the instantaneous flash, it does come in.
Yeah.
We want a small aperture. If we're going to get a black background, we want all of our subject to be sharp, and we'll get the separation and the impact of that subject from the black background. So we might as well show as much of the subject as sharp as possible with a small aperture, and that small aperture, again, helps stop too much ambient light coming in.
Yeah, reducing light, yeah.
Yeah, and then finally, we want to use a low ISO setting, so the camera sensitivity. Turn that down nice and low, and again, that makes the camera less sensitive to light as a whole, and that helps us stop getting too much ambient light into the picture. So it's fast shutter speed, small aperture, low ISO.
Yep.
That combination allows you to get black backgrounds.
Just a word there, Alex, just on shutter speed. Obviously, bear in mind that your camera will have a flash sync speed, so it needs to be at the top of its flash sync speed, not at its maximum shutter speed. So if your flash sync speed in your camera is at 250th, for example, 250th of a second, set it to 250th. Don't go beyond that. Sorry, yeah.
Unless you've watched our high-speed sync.
unless you've got some...
but Adam's absolutely right. And actually, because a lot of compact shooters ask this question, a lot of compact shooters are limited by how much they can close the aperture. A lot of the cameras don't close more than f8, f11, and that's actually why people struggle to get the black backgrounds. But as long as you're using a low ISO, and quite a few compacts, you can exceed that kind of classic synchronization speed of a 250th, even use a 500th or more, and that can help you get a nice dark background. So on a compact camera, you might end up not being able to close your aperture as much, but you are able to use a faster shutter speed.
I guess be aware of the flash sync speed is an important.
Yeah, no, but it's a really important point. Then you've got to earn that black background by finding the right subject. So if a subject is automatically swimming in open water, like the fish I just showed you, then it's relatively easy to frame that subject against open water and not get a black background. So what I should explain really, I guess, is you're lighting your subject with flash. What is there in the frame to bounce the flash back to the camera will be lit. Where there's nothing in the frame for the flash to be bounced back from, it will be black. So if you have a fish swimming in open water, you can light that with flash. The fish will reflect that light back to the camera. The rest of the frame, the light will just keep on going at gazillions of miles an hour, and it won't come back and make your picture. However, I think things become more complicated where with a lot of our macro subjects, they're subjects sitting on the seabed, and therefore it can be a lot harder to get that background. And a lot of this now comes down to subject selection. You might find a really amazing subject on a dive, but if it's tucked down into the seabed, you're unlikely to be able to find a good angle to get a good quality background, particularly a good quality black background. So it can be often a case of either waiting to find another individual of that species in a more convenient place, or actually putting your effort into a maybe less rare species in a convenient place. So look for subjects that are sitting perched up on various features within the environment, because these will then allow you to find those angles, those viewpoints that allow you to frame that subject against open water. And a lot of the time this can make it, it's quite a lot of contorting and discomfort. It's not always, the easy way to take an underwater photo is just to swim all over the top of things and shoot down into the seabed.
Straight down,
But you're going to get backgrounds there which are reflecting the light and be busy and dirty. To get those black backgrounds, you've often got to, work down. With my bad neck, it's not the easiest thing. But even, a lot of underwater photographers even hang completely upside down to take these types of shots. Allows you to find that angle to frame the subject. So you really earn that by finding the right subjects, identifying the right subjects, and then contorting to those angles to get the framing against open water. And that is basically the fundamentals of the technique.
I think one of the things that we spoke about in one of our earlier videos about sort of diving skills for underwater photography was this idea that we want to get close to the bottom, we want to get low. We don't really want to impact the bottom, but we want to get as low as possible. And this is definitely a technique that lends itself to getting low, or getting the camera low, and so again, things like good buoyancy skills, all that kind of stuff really do bear good fruit for this, for managing to do that. Yeah, for sure.
So I just wanted to finish by talking about 3 other ways to get black backgrounds, kind of a little bit more advanced techniques. And these are useful when maybe we find a subject that's a really great subject, but it's not in a good position. And there's 2 sort of selective lighting techniques that we can use for this. And the first of those is using a snoot. A snoot creates a beam of light, a spotlight in a picture. And just as an actor standing on a stage in a spotlight will be completely surrounded by black because nothing else is lit, the same is true of a subject. So you can have a macro subject on the seabed, not with nice surroundings, but if you light it with that beam of light from a snoot, you're then able to light that subject and not light the surroundings up, and have a subject that was in a busy environment actually photographed against a nice clean black background. A variation of this, or another variation on selective lighting with strobes, is to use inward lighting technique. And I'm not going to explain the whole technique now, but this is a technique where we push with macro, we push our strobes forward in front of our camera so that they're in line with the subject, and then we rotate them all the way back round so they're actually pointing straight back at us. Most of the light isn't lighting anything, but the very inward edge of those beams cuts across and lights the very front of the subject. And it allows us to light a subject and not light what's immediately behind it. And it can be a very effective way of creating a black background with subjects sitting on the seabed and that sort of thing. And it's a technique I use a lot. And it's very easy to set up. You don't need any extra equipment on the dive. And it can be a really powerful technique. And I shoot quite a lot of macro this way anyway, because it naturally emphasizes the subject more than the background. So even if you're not going for a jet black background, it helps to isolate the subjects.
So just to recap, obviously it's conceptually what you're doing there is the strobes are pointing towards you, and because the strobes have an angle of beam spread, the edge of that beam captures the subject, and the rest of the light is thrown back towards you, which of course isn't captured by the lens. So it's quite an advanced technique. It's certainly one that takes a bit of experimentation. So if it's something you're interested with, that's probably certainly a good opportunity to either obviously formally go out in a workshop and figure out how it works, but alternatively get in the water with your strobes and just play with the strobe angles with the subject. and see how it works. It takes a little bit of getting used to. So yeah,
you can actually learn inward lighting very well on a tabletop. Actually, you don't have to go underwater.
There you go.
You can just set your rig up on a tabletop, and it works really well on land. And then the final way that you can create black backgrounds is to take an artificial background down with you. I'm not a big fan of this technique. I don't really like introducing artificial things into my pictures. But I do, when I teach underwater photography, I do encourage people to at least try this. I think it's a useful skill to learn and to try doing. There are quite a lot of problems of using artificial backgrounds. The most common one I see when I see photographers doing this is those backgrounds tend to fall over and fall on top of the subject, which is obviously far from what anyone wants to do. So, but if well managed, people, you can do them well, particularly if you work with a buddy and they hold the background.
Yeah, I think
typically people use sort of a piece of Perspex about this sort of size, about the size of a sort of a large postcard, small book, a novel, that's paperback novel, that sort of thing. Is a nice size for a piece of Perspex. You want a nice matte color so it's not bouncing the light back too much. Yeah, that sort of size. And then you want to hold it behind the subject, but angle it slightly backwards from the subject. So again, any reflective light doesn't create a hot spot. So just very slightly angle back, and then the reflected light bounces up and away. And that works very well. It's much better to have someone hold it than try and rest it there. If you don't have a black background easily to hand, I have seen people actually use their buddy's leg, which sounds sort of hard to control, but most divers wear black wetsuits. And if your buddy's got nice thick legs like me, they can actually, if you get them to hover in the right place, it can be a surprisingly useful black background opportunity. But I mean, that was slightly jokey comment. If you want to use a black background, I would use a dedicated one. You can use other colors as well if you're really into this artificial backgrounds. For me, I go underwater to see nature and to appreciate nature. I don't like the introduction of artificial human elements into my pictures, but some people really enjoy that. So
I think the other thing is that oftentimes you can actually achieve the same results by using good photographic technique rather than necessarily need to introduce an artificial background. There are occasions when it's possibly the only option, but that they're probably rarer than they are common. So just to summarize, the key to getting black backgrounds is to light the subject with flash and to stop the ambient light really coming into the exposure. And we do that by using a fast shutter speed, a small aperture, a low ISO. Then we earn that black background by finding the right subjects and contorting to the angles to give us the viewpoint that frames them against open water or at least distant background so that there's no reflected light from the flash guns coming back from around them. And you get, as a result, a beautiful subject on a clean black background. And it showcases the subjects. It puts in the spotlight, as you mentioned. That's a great technique. Thank you, Alex. That's very comprehensive. And I'm going to lead this because I know that the book that you held up earlier is your book.
Yes,
and that has.
I didn't show you the cover.
There you go.
It's still my working copy on my desk.
That has a bunch of information about lighting in general.
Yeah, look at that. There you go. I found this page quickly.
You come back this way.
Right place. How to get black backgrounds and obviously there's variations you can do. There's shot there with blue background as well.
So it's a really, it's important to stress. I mean, we've aimed this at people possibly starting out on this sort of journey as macro photographers. There's a lot of really valuable information in Alex's books and in Alex's book, and to be fair, in lots of other books too. So it's a good opportunity to read and develop this technique a bit through some theoretical background as well. So thank you very much, Alex. I'm just going to, there we are. I'd like to thank Inon that sponsored this episode very much. Please, if you enjoyed this episode, please like it. Also feel very free to add suggestions for future episodes in the comment section below. Thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you again soon.